The Borysaglebsky district of the Yaroslavl region is famous for its ancient monastery, a favorite of the Moscow princes and the first Russian Tsars. In recent years, more and more immigrants have settled in the neighborhood, mostly from the USA. What attracts them so much to this land? We will try to find answers. Let's start looking in the nearest city in the Borysaglebsky district, Rostov-Veliki.
First came here in October of 2016 and I was amazed. I mean, look at how beautiful this cathedral, the bell tower, just the history that's here in Rostov was amazing to me. And of course, Father Roman, you've met him. He has 8 children just like I do. And he and all the people here in Rostov were so friendly and welcoming to us. And I do remember that very first week that we arrived, it was the coldest Christmas in Russia for 125 years. And so it was minus 35. And it was so cold. But we got through it. And I just told my wife, I said, don't worry. I said, it's only going to get warmer. And so that really turned out to be true, that in the nearly 8 years that we've been here since then, it's been a lot warmer than that.
Father Joseph Gleason, an American citizen, has been well exposed to the Russian language in the 7 years he has lived in Russia, but still speaks with difficulty. He made his way from Protestantism to Orthodoxy, from a deacon of the Anglican Church to an Orthodox priest, from America to Russia. This is footage from 2018. Here, at this time, the Gleason family was living in a church house provided for them. It seems that they are already happy here. The children are learning Russian, learning music. Their mother Amy is smiling as she speaks about how she followed her husband to Russia. To be honest, at first it was a bit of a shock. However, I later realized that it would be best for our family to live in a place where Orthodoxy was the dominant religion.
The main reason that my family and I moved here because Russia is one of the only countries in the world that has preserved traditional family values. In 2015, the Supreme Court made that terrible decision, but there were still a lot of Americans who were opposed to it and they did not agree with it. But today, unfortunately, in the polls, in all 50 states, the majority of people support LGBT. And if you look at the country as a whole, 70% support LGBT.
In Russia, an American priest was received at the cathedral in Rostov. First, he served as a pilgrim, then he was ordained. He became a cleric of the church in the village of Krasnovo, Borysaglebsky district.
Отец Иосиф, скажите, пожалуйста, за все то время...
Father Joseph, could you tell me, during all the time you've been living in Russia, have you, your family and your children regretted staying?
We don't regret coming here. My wife and I really like it here. We are learning the language, and my children, they really love it here. I've asked multiple times, do you wish that we moved back to America? Are you sorry that we moved here? And they really like it here, and they want to live the rest of their lives here. So I think we're going to stay here.
As a pioneer, Father Joseph is a guiding star in secular and religious life for Americans who want to settle in Russia.
So a way that I've helped a lot of people is simply just explaining the process. What papers do you need from America? What documents? Once you arrive in Russia, who do you talk to? What forms do you need to fill out? Just giving them the basic information of how to immigrate has been helpful to a lot of people. But even before that, the way I help most people is simply telling them why they would want to move to Russia, helping them to see that the American propaganda about Russia is false. And once they see what Russia really is like, then they become attracted and they want to live here.
In a few years of living in Russia, the Gleasons built a house and got a farm. Father Joseph runs the English website Russian Faith, a Telegram channel, and Facebook where he tells foreigners about life in Russia. Some of these individuals and families he has already helped move here.
There's a lot of families that have come to Russia. They don't, obviously, even if they see what I say online, they don't all just come to Rostov. Some of the families, they come to Moscow. Some of the families, they come to St. Petersburg or Nizhny Novgorod or Sochi. But there's also other families that have come to this area from Brazil, from Denmark, from Australia. I have some friends that have moved to Russia from Canada, so they come from everywhere.
By the way, representatives of the Orthodox Church here in Russia and in the Rostov-Veliki area are not at all surprised that foreigners choose the Yaroslavl region and its surroundings. Large cities such as Rostov, villages such as Berseglebsky, and smaller surrounding villages.
Древний город, князь Владимир Красное Солнышко крестил только в Ростове.
The ancient city of Rostov, where Prince Vladimir the Red Sun baptized all of northeastern Russia, is our homeland. It is the birthplace of both the state and Orthodox Christianity. That's why people come here, feeling a special connection to this place. In the Yaroslavl region, and especially in Rostov the Great, there is an ancient cathedral with many saints and relics, creating an oasis of Orthodox spirituality that draws people in.
Americans often display flags in their homes, and this tradition continues here. But now the flags are Russian. Daniel Fruhit and his wife Sarah, along with their 5 daughters, have been living in their home for almost a year.
Привет!
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Крошечная кухня.
In the little kitchen, Sarah runs the show, assisted by Daniel. Daniel, by the way, prefers to be called by his Russian name, Daniil. They sit down at the table and offer us coffee with milk.
Даниил, на вас косоворотка.
Daniel, you're wearing a traditional Russian shirt, your children have Slavic names, and even your cat has a Russian name. In general, you seem more Russian than most Russians. How about the differences in mentality?
Thank you. Lord have mercy.
I've had people say this to me on our YouTube channel. They have made comments similar to this, and I can only, it's a very humbling thing to hear something like that said. All I can say is that we were born in America, right, but with Russian souls. And that's why we came home to Russia. So first let me say that my wife and I have been Orthodox for almost, we're getting close to 10 years now. We came to the Orthodox faith in 2015. Actually, it'll be, this month is an anniversary. The Catholic Church, they have this thing where they have like a menu of like different types of services for the conservatives and for traditionalists, and then for like teenagers, and then for more liberal, so it was a mess. And we started to look around, and then we discovered the Byzantine Catholic Church, and we went to a Byzantine Catholic Church for a few Sundays. Around this time, we were moving out of our apartment to our first home in Anna, and we were looking around for a church. We found that there was a Russian Orthodox church just 10 minutes from our house. It's a very small, very new church. It wasn't grand, right? It wasn't like some grand cathedral. But when we went into this church, we realized that there was so much peace in this church, right? There was a sense of warmth, and you could feel the Spirit of God in this place. It felt familiar. It felt like something we had seen before. It felt like home, right?
Surprisingly, the 5 children in this small room allow us to communicate calmly. The girls take turns running up to their father to hug him, and he explains to us that the move was primarily for their sake.
The USA is not the best place to raise children right now.
Why?
In America, the very fundamental aspects of civilization, the foundation of civilization, the fact of men and women, male and female, just these basic laws of nature are under attack. In America, I have to be careful because I don't necessarily want to say this in front of my children, but there's this idea that the idea of a man and a woman is something fluid that can be changed. So they've attacked the very foundation of truth and of family in America. And it's something that it's creating a crisis in the American family. It's creating a crisis with children, just undermining the very basis of someone's identity. For my wife and I, we were married in 2014, and we already had thoughts of leaving the United States. We had seen how much the United States had changed, even in such a short time since when we were children, and how much the way of life had changed just in so many ways. And we knew that we wanted to raise our children as Christians, that as Orthodox Christians. All of our children were baptized as infants in the Orthodox Church, in a Russian church in Texas. We started to see the signs, especially in the schools, where they started to introduce curriculum and ideology in American public schools that began to teach things that were incredibly radical, things that would have never been possible even 20 years before, things like the LGBT agenda. Teaching children that their gender is something that can be changed, for instance. Teaching completely alienating faith and God from the classroom. There's no room for that. It's strictly science. It's all about science.
Daniel is certain that the country they have left violates the principles of democracy it once proclaimed, and he rejects the people of himself.
Americans need better leadership, and I hope that Americans are starting to realize that. I think some of them are, and that they will vote these people out in the coming election if they still have faith in their democracy. Many people are worried that perhaps even their vote no longer counts. Perhaps the elections will be rigged.
Daniel, your living conditions seem quite modest, considering that you have 5 daughters living in the same room. How do you manage to accommodate them all?
So I understand this is a common, question that many people might have if they see such a large family in a small house. Well, first let me say that we have experience living in a very large house. In Texas, our house was 3,500 square feet, very large, 5 bedrooms. So we had a very large room for my wife and I and our children. There was another 4 bedrooms in the house. So we had tons of space. But the problem with that is when you have tons of space, you also drift apart from one another. The family, the children go off in one area and the parents are over here. And the technology, the children have the phones and the computers and they're off, with that technology by themselves while the mom and dad are watching their Netflix show, right? And what happens? Things start to happen in the family that are not what you would expect or what you would want. The family starts to grow apart. You're not aware of the type of ideas that your children are being exposed to. There's not as much supervision with your children, for instance. There's not as much cultivation of the love that is expected in a family because you're just so far apart. Since coming to Russia and living in a smaller house, we're with each other, all the time. We're always right next to our children. They can come to us. We read to them more often. We have more occasions to interact with our children. We take part in one another's lives in a way that we may not have had we had a much larger house.
Meanwhile, Sarah somehow manages to make traditional Texas tortillas. Maybe she's not too comfortable. We'll try to find out.
Сара, вы-то настоящая героиня. Все хозяйство держите.
Sarah, you're a real hero. The whole household is supported by you. Children, cleaning, cooking. I also know that you used to live in a huge house, 300 square meters. Now it is a small hut. How?
It is very different. It took a lot of adjusting in the beginning to go from a very, very large kitchen with everything that I was used to having all the time, all the appliances and things, and the space to store all kinds of foods that I would need, because we tried not to eat out. American food is highly processed, so if you cook a lot of things from scratch, like we like to do, with raw ingredients, you have to have a lot of space to store those things. So when we moved here, I had to learn how to cook differently. I had to adjust a lot of things, but the quality of Russian food is much better. It is much better here, and we feel better. Our health has improved.
But this little girl has a dream, and not a common dream among young children. She has wanted to be a nun since before she was 4 years of age, and this desire only increased more after the family visited the Tolga monastery. Anastasia, I was told you want to become a nun. Is this true?
It's because I just thought it would be something nice to do for God, but I love all the icons, and I love how it just tells me something about becoming a nun, because it's so beautiful at the monastery, and I want to become a nun because I think it would be helpful to my family.
Дэниел – специалист видеомонтажа и фотообработки.
Daniel is a specialist in video editing and photo processing. He runs his own blog and plans to develop in this field. Another big family wants to study farming and setting up a garden around the house. Our next heroes, Aaron and Daniela, moved from Wisconsin to the village of Dobrinska. By the way, we have already managed to acquire a large household. We will go to them.
Сколько вы уже живете?
How long have you been living in Russia?
2 years.
2 years. And how do you like it?
I love Russia very much. This is a very beautiful land.
Сейчас у меня есть друзья.
And now I have friends. More than I had in America.
Да.
And why is that?
Я не знаю, может быть, потому что в Америке.
I don't know, maybe it's because I'm practically a dissident in America.
Потому что я не верю
Because I'm not lying about the things America does in the world.
What exactly are you talking about?
Very bad things. The war, the problem in Ukraine. America is omnipresent. It has an impact on many countries, and only in Russia can you feel free from it.
Aaron Christodoulou, магистр теологии.
Aaron Christodoulou is a master of theology and speaks 5 languages. Daniela is a chemist. They were in demand. They had a good standard of living in the United States, but because of their views on traditional values, problems began at work.
Basically, I realized that the longer that I worked there, the more that I was compromising my own morals. Because as long as you work for a company, if you let's say, for example, like if you meet people who disagree with you, if you don't go along with the politically correct thing in America, you'll get fired.
There are icons everywhere in their house too. Aaron is from an Orthodox family and he's connected to the church. I also introduced Daniela.
I fell in love with the church, I fell in love with him, and the rest is history.
It was not so easy for them to leave their country.
There's a lot of paperwork, obviously. And it's not the easiest thing in the world to come here and go through all the steps. You know, we've had some rough patches. But the hardest thing usually is getting all of your documents from America, because they try to rig it. You only have 3 months when you get here with your criminal record stuff. They try to rig it up so that it will expire before it even arrives. So we had to send like 3 times for documents just to, you know, make things work. It was real hard.
Today they are talking about the decree of the Russian president issued in August this year on the provision of humanitarian support for persons who share traditional Russian, spiritual and moral values. They believe that the decree will make it easier for many of their fellow countrymen to move.
People in America will realize what a benefit that is. Would probably depend if they knew someone that came under the old way. It will make the process easier. Whether the new people coming realize how much harder it was versus now is debatable, but it is certainly going to save people money and time and a little bit of like fear, because especially if you have Europeans on tight visas, you know, Americans can get a 3-year visa, but Europeans can only get a 3-month visa. That's the big thing. So like I was saying, if you're from the European Union, you only had 3 months. And I don't think it was possible to be done. You know, you'd have had to have had special, I don't know, you would have had to have some big friends.
The last 5 years there, very, very suddenly life changed. And you get people who have children especially, or even people who just have jobs, and all of a sudden their children are being exposed to the worst kinds of culture. Men are dressing as women, they're dressing as women prostitutes and going into the kindergartens.
Yeah, that's true. That's nasty.
And people are protesting, and they're simply losing their jobs for protesting.
And that's the $1 million question, isn't it? Why isn't any of America's buddies on the list of bad guys? Man, that's a hard one, isn't it? You know, I could talk forever about this, but okay, so what's really interesting, I'll just pick one thing. The Jehovah's Witness thing, these Jehovah's Witness guys. They're banned here in Russia, and in my opinion, rightly so. And what's really fascinating about it is that they are also banned in Ukraine, because these white papers, there's more than one. I read the one about Russia. I also read the one about Ukraine that they wrote. It was a little friendlier, but they're also persecuted in Ukraine, but they don't seem to make as big of a deal about that. I wonder why. And another thing that you may not know is that they are also unofficially persecuted in America. Yes, the government will not openly come out and say, yes, we are, not with these guys, but they suffer abuses and insults, and people, I don't know, slam the door in their faces and call them names in America, just like they do here and just like they do in Ukraine. But interestingly enough, they don't seem to be crying about it in their papers, what's happening in their own backyard.
Whether they think about these problems less and less often, they're thinking about something else. They really want to have children. In the meantime, they have bought a house, have started keeping bees and goats, making cheese, and to establish a farm.
Она туда?
Это и это дают молоко.
Да. И чуть-чуть она, да.
This is the auditorium of Yaroslavl State University. Aaron is here as an invited guest to give a lecture to students. The topic is the role of Russia in the preservation and consolidation of universally recognized values. There has been a common language found in every sense. Students of the Institute of Foreign Languages not only understand but are vividly interested. They know about life in America, reasons for moving, and, as it turns out, they know something about the situation in the world.
I think if I was an American who was tired of LGBT stuff, I firstly moved to someplace like Texas.
Очень интересно послушать про скажем так, нашего американца, да.
It was very interesting to hear from our American friend with the Russian soul, so to speak. There may be more like him in the West than we think, but their voices are overshadowed by others, who we hear so often about. Representatives of organizations that are banned in our country. Thank God for it. It was interesting to listen to their point of view.
After the lecture, the female students gathered around Daniela and asked her questions for a long time. They were curious about her experience and wanted to learn more about her life in Russia. Here at the walls of the Bersaglebsky monastery, we have another foreigner waiting for us. His name is Michael, and the locals already call him Misha. He has an interesting story to tell. Michael, hello.
Hello, it's a pleasure.
My name is Nelly. It's a pleasure to meet you. Well, we're meeting here for a reason. Firstly, because as I was told, your living conditions are still quite modest. Tell me, where do you live here?
I live in Borysaglebsky. I rent a room now.
Michael Moisel is a highly qualified IT specialist. His parents are German, but he was born in America.
Because I realized that in the USA, society is slowly falling apart, I started looking deep into basically philosophical questions, and that actually made me become a Christian in 2019. And then I was thinking, okay, if I leave the US, where do I go to? And then Christianity became an important question for me, and I looked a lot. I saw a lot of short videos or interviews or articles about people who had visited Russia, and I was thinking, Russia looks interesting. I should really visit Russia and see it for myself. And so finally, because of COVID, everything got delayed, my plans, and finally in December 22, I was able to visit Russia for the first time.
He has already received a temporary residence permit in Russia and has studied all the necessary nuances to help any foreigner in this process.
I had very little time pressure. That's a very big plus for me. And so I could get all my papers ready, and then I need, in the end, after you have your passport with your tourist visa, you need 2 more papers. One is the criminal background check, and the other one is your birth certificate.
Michael's mother lives in Germany and his sister lives in America, but they still can't understand his decision to emigrate. Most likely they will not come to visit him, as well as he will not visit them. In current realities, it is impossible. Nevertheless, Michael's attitude is positive. He bought a plot, and next year he will begin construction of his house. He is looking for a job in his specialty. Did you say that you already have a friend?
Да.
Yes, I already have one. We go to church every Sunday, and he helps me with official matters.
Идет в церковь, помогал много с официальными формами и переводчик.
What's his name?
Vasily.
Well, have you ever thought that perhaps here in Russia you will create your own family and meet your love?
I do hope that I find a woman here that I can maybe even start a family together with, yes.
Our heroes are of different ages, professions and have different living conditions, but the white lines are common. Their values, which are taught and promoted by the Orthodox Church and now encouraged and enforced by law in Russia.
Когда ценности, одно дело, они узаконены, когда они...
When values become legalized, when they become something fundamental for people living in a particular country, particularly in Russia, this is one thing. Therefore, a presidential decree has been created on the preservation of traditional values, listing them out, and so people are drawn to those values. But there is also a struggle in the world, not so much between different civilizations, but rather between civilizations and anti-civilizations. Because, unfortunately, the values that they profess are destructive for them. Once upon a time, they had a civilization and values, but over time, these were removed.
After spending 2 days with these Russian Americans, we realized something. They don't see Russia as a paradise on earth. It tests them and challenges their strength. They persistently try to grow their roots into this land. And always one repeat, faith helps.
Сколько еще?
How many others seeking peace in orthodoxy will Father Joseph bring with him to our land? Which way will Daniel and Sarah's daughters choose? What will the children of Aaron and Daniela, who, God willing, will one day be born in Russia, be like? How soon will Michael see his mother and sister? Only time will give answers to these questions. These are the choices that they have made for themselves.